Good morning, everyone. For Telesur, I'm Sarah Begum in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin today in China, where on Monday, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro met with leading members of the Chinese business community as part of his visit to the Asian nation. During the encounter, the Venezuelan president discussed new energy and economic alliances with members of the Chinese Development Bank, the Bank of China, and the National Petroleum Corporation of China. The meetings have come in run-up to the summit to be held between the Asian giant and the members of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean Nations regional bloc, set for Thursday and Friday. Speaking on Venezuela-China relations, Vice President of Economy and Finance, Rodolfo Marco Torres, highlighted Beijing's willingness to work with Caracas to strengthen ties. And Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa is also in China ahead of the Thursday summit. His arrival marks the first time in history that an Ecuadorian head of state officially visits the Asian nation. Over the years, Ecuador-China relations have increased, with Ecuador importing more than $630 million in Chinese goods. Likewise, Ecuador has sent approximately $560 million worth of products to China. And in Mexico, the family of missing photojournalist Moisés Cerezo is accusing local authorities of being involved in the disappearance. The Attorney General's office of the Mexican state of Veracruz announced Monday that several municipal police of the community, Medellín de Bravo, have been detained in connection to the forced disappearance of the journalist and social activist on January 2nd. The case of Cerezo follows on allegations that Mexican authorities were also involved in the abduction of 43 students from the state of Guerrero. The case of the students has mobilized massive opposition to the Mexican government over the past 3 months. And while he is being accused of overseeing the disappearance of political activists and students in his home country, Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto is in Washington today, where he is meeting with his U.S. counterpart, Barack Obama. Our correspondent, Clayton Conn, has more.
In his visit to Washington today, Mexico's President Enrique Peña Nieto and his counterpart, U.S. President Barack Obama, are discussing issues such as migration, economic development, as well as security and issues of human rights. It was nearly 1 year ago that the international press labeled Peña Nieto as, quote, saving Mexico for a series of structural reforms. However, now after the enforced disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students in September, the mass extrajudicial murder of 22 by the army this past summer, and now a peso that has dramatically declined in value in recent weeks, many are now reevaluating the work of this administration. While the authorities in Mexico say they are taking steps to counter widespread corruption and accusations of human rights abuses, widespread protests and social unrest continues. This is Clayton Conn reporting for Telesur here in Mexico City.
In Guatemala, former dictator and convicted human rights offender Efrain Rios Montt has once again avoided trial for genocide. Montt's trial was once again suspended after Judge Janet Valdez recused herself following defense team arguments that she could not be impartial. Their accusations that she would not preside fairly over the trial stem from a thesis she wrote in 2004 on genocide. Her recusal means that the trial will be suspended indefinitely until a new tribunal can be formed. Rios Montt was found guilty of genocide and crimes against humanity in May 2013 and sentenced to 80 years in prison. That decision was overturned for procedural reasons 10 days later. And in Peru, labor unions are outraged following the dismissal of some 2,700 public sector workers. The firings came as the first action in office of new Lima Mayor Luis Castaneda, who has sworn in on Monday. Most of the workers were informed of their release upon arriving to work on Tuesday. The former employees, many of whom work in security and transportation, say that they will fight the arbitrary firings. And we go now to the United States, where as the 114th Congress begin work on Tuesday, federal action on gun control continues to be non-existent. Our correspondent Alexandra Hall has the story.
2 years after the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting and not one federal law on gun control passed. According to the latest Pew Research poll, 52% of Americans think it's more important to protect the right to own guns than to control who can buy them and who can't.
It's ingrained in the Constitution and ingrained in the people of America, by and large, to have access to pistols and shotguns.
Failed legislation has attempted to limit the purchase of assault weapons or keep guns out of the hands of buyers with a history of mental illness, requirements that for about half of Americans seem reasonable.
You can go out and shoot a shotgun, shoot a couple shots, shoot at a bird or whatever, but to have one that will repeatedly shoot a barrage of bullets, to me, it's selfish.
Divisions over what causes gun violence and what could prevent it has motivated reformists to redirect the conversation about gun control to one of gun safety. But politics could still get in the way.
There's such a strong lobby movement within the NRA and within Congress and private industry. It's a very tough thing to crack through.
Tough to crack through, at least from the federal government's perspective. In the absence of nationwide legislation and following a recent victory in Washington state where voters recently approved universal background checks, advocates say that they may have to rely on state ballot initiatives in order to protect future victims of gun violence. In Washington, I'm Alexandra Hall for Telesur.
And we end today on a chilly note in Bulgaria, where locals have a unique way of celebrating Christ's baptism, celebrated every January the 6th. To mark the Christian feast of Epiphany, thousands of men plunge every year into icy rivers across Bulgaria to retrieve wooden crucifixes thrown into the waters by Orthodox priests. Epiphany celebrates the day the Spirit of God descended upon believers in the shape of a dove during Christ's baptism in the River Jordan. The Bulgarian celebration of the holy day goes back hundreds of years and involves a night-long preparation with songs, food, and homemade wine and brandy. More on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Sarah Begum. Have a good day.